Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 485. All right, guys, welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise awareness of trauma and to support new trauma therapists just starting out on their trauma-informed journey. I do that through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. If you're a therapist of any kind, interested in learning about trauma, and you're looking for support and inspiration, I invite you to check out Trauma Therapist 2.0 by going to traumatherapist2.com. That's traumatherapist, the number 2.com. All right, let's get started. All right, folks, before we get started, I want to thank my sponsor for today, Somatic Experiencing. Are you in the helping profession and looking for a new tool to treat your clients? Somatic Experiencing, developed by Dr. Peter Levine, is a potent psychobiological approach to resolving the symptoms of trauma and chronic stress. Offered by the Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute, the SE Professional Training Program enables you as a practitioner to empower your clients to learn tools that develop resilience and manage stress long-term. If you'd like to learn more about how Somatic Experiencing can help you empower your clients, you can check out the SE Basics webinar at no charge by going to traumahealing.org/traumatherapist. Once again, go to traumahealing.org/traumatherapist before November 30th. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Guy McPherson here, and very excited to have as my guest today, Mahshid Hager. Mahshid, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So Mahshid is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a somatic experiencing practitioner. Her professional life includes providing therapeutic services to clients from all walks of life, volunteering for nonprofit organizations in San Diego that offer resources to new incoming refugees, and attending somatic experiencing training modules in various capacities and supporting SC students. Originally from Tehran, Iran, Mahshid moved to Germany with her family after the Iranian Revolution. After high school, she immigrated to San Diego, California, where she now lives with her husband and 2 sons. In recent years, Mahshid has discovered her love of writing. She's the author of the short story No Way Back and the playwright of the same name titled One Person Show. Let me say that again. She's the author of the short story No Way Back and the playwright of the same titled One Person Show, which will be available for streaming through Roustabout's theater company in November. All right, awesome. I'll edit that out and edit this out, so no problem. Mahshid, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Guy.
All right. So before we start here, let's just go over a little bit. So share with the listeners where you're from originally and how you got here in San Diego.
So I'm originally from Iran, Tehran. I was born in Tehran in 1971, so pre-revolution, and lived there through 1981. So past the revolution, about a year and a half into the Iran-Iraq war, at which point my family actually escaped Iran through the mountains on foot to Turkey.
Oh my God.
And then from Turkey.
So you did that?
I did that. That's why I'm here.
Oh my God. I mean, it's just crazy really to think about.
It really is a crazy story. And I think that's part of why I didn't talk about it for 30 years, because it was one of those stories where it was like, I'm going to get that reaction and I don't have the capacity to hold that reaction. Like it sounds so unreal that my whole family literally didn't talk about it for 30 years.
Oh my gosh.
And so we immigrated to Germany, and then my parents started a life in Germany, and I grew up there, so did all of my teenage years there and finished high school there. And this dream of coming to the US to study here had been planted way earlier in life when my uncle had immigrated to the US to study back when I was like 3 or 4 years old. So that had always been an option in the future. So when I graduated high school, I decided to give that a shot and came out here, originally thinking, I was going to get a bachelor's degree in international business. And then I was going to go back to Germany and work for some big corporation and travel. And then I took one accounting class, and then that was that.
Nice.
And I decided to pursue my true interest, which was psychology, and then just ended up staying here and getting married, and that's how I'm here today.
So let's talk about this interest in psychology. How did that develop? How did that come about?
The interest in psychology was sparked back in Germany. The high school there is structured kind of like a community college. So you pick some majors and some minors. And one of my minors was child development. And that was kind of like, I wasn't an A student in high school. I kind of got by. I did okay. But the child development class was effortless, and school had never been effortless for me. It was just like, oh my gosh, I just like can't get enough of reading and learning and remembering. And so when I came out here and that business major kind of, started to fizzle, it was just like, my heart isn't in it. And it's way too big of a struggle to try to stay focused and try to, pursue this. So what would I do if I could do anything? And I was like, remembering how easy the child development class was. Yeah. And so I was like, why don't I take a psychology 101 as a general ed and see if it feels the same? And sure enough, it did. And so I changed majors and pursued that. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. You found your thing, or it found you.
I did really find my thing.
Yeah, I love that. So let's kind of continue on here in this vein and talk about this, trauma and how that came about. I mean, obviously, you're talking about this crazy experience, not crazy, but amazing, crazy, incredible experience you had. But go on. How did that come about for you?
So like I said, like when we, after you go through something like that, you are in survival mode for years to come, and you don't know that you are. And I was a 10-year-old child, like for my parents, I going through life, I often imagine what it must have been like for them to give up everything they had earned up to that point, everyone they loved, give up, their homeland for a better future for their kids. They had 3 kids at the time. I was 10. My sisters were 3 and 2. And so when we landed in Germany, it was survival. It was just like work as hard as you can, try to rebuild a life. And there wasn't really much time for trauma processing or talking about what we just went through. It was just like go, 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 go. And that was normal. That was just what we did. And then here, when I work with refugees here, I can recognize in them as well. Like they land here and it's immediately like, kids need to go to school. I need to find a job, blah, 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 language classes. And it's like, yeah, I can sense that emergency in their body still. I didn't know what it was. I just thought that was life. I was so young when that happened. And it wasn't until I became a psychologist and I was working and, had hit a period of my time that was really, really challenging. My father passed away in 2003. He lost his battle to cancer. And at around the same time, I was in a marriage that was falling apart. And I had these 2 little kids. And all of a sudden, it felt like I can't handle my life. Like and I'd been in therapy, and I had some great therapists along the way that had helped sort of with the structures of how to cope. And it didn't seem enough. It was like, I know what my old therapist is going to tell me, and it's not enough. I'm doing the mantras, I'm doing the mindfulness, I'm doing the, take care of myself as best as I can. And it's not enough. There is something else that I'm not getting at. I had just this real sense of it. And so I put some fillers out to friends and family of like, is there someone that I could see that could help me process the heaviness of life right now? And then came across a woman in San Diego, Dr. Drew Bogdanoff, who is an SEP, somatic experiencing practitioner, and really got exposed to what it would feel like to address the part of the brain that's actually holding the trauma, and to include my body in that process. And it was life altering,
Wow. Okay, let me just stop you here for 1 second. So when you were going through this period, which you called, it was just very heavy, you were going through this time with your marriage and so forth. During that time, or even any previous time, did you recognize that experience of moving through the mountains as something that was traumatic for you, or something that was there as trauma?
I don't know that I used those words ever, like I knew that we went through something horrendous. I knew that. I mean, you couldn't go, there's so many life-threatening events in that week that we, crossed the mountains, that was undeniable. But I don't think I quite understood how that event from 30 years ago affected my life today. How my body was actually still in that survival response. I don't think I made that connection until I was in therapy with a somatic experiencing practitioner.
So what was it? Take us back to that time, if you will. I mean, what was it about that experience with that SE practitioner that was life-changing for you?
Yeah. I think it was, I remember our first session, and I came in, and it was, I'm rattling off all the things that are horrible about my life. Yeah. And one of those things that was so heavy at the time was this custody battle I was involved in. And I was representing myself, and how hard that was to show up to court and like really be present for the battle, really. And she said something like, I bet there's some anger inside there. And I was like, yeah, I'm really angry. And she said, I wonder if you could growl. And I was like, well, yeah, that would be interesting. And she says, no, if you were a bear in the woods and somebody was coming for your bear cubs, somebody was coming for your babies, you would growl. And I was like, yeah, I'm just like that bear. I would totally growl. And she kind of picked up her mug of tea and leaned back and said, I'll wait. Go ahead. I started eyeing the door, how quickly can I get out of here? And she just like patiently walked me through. She's like, just try and see what that feels like. And eventually there was this like guttural growl. And I sat back, and she's like, now notice what your spine is doing. And I was like, oh, I'm just actually sitting taller. I'm breathing deeper. I walked out of that room feeling 3 inches taller, and it felt like, okay, like I feel like I can walk into my life and I have this bigger container, and, I was a single mom at the time, so I couldn't see her regularly. And that was the other thing, which was like, oh, with this therapy, I don't feel like I need it every week, but if I can just like touch in with her every other week or every like 20 days or so, I can manage my life, And it wasn't like we didn't dive into the trauma of my childhood for a long, long time because there were more pressing issues. But my nervous system regulation and my building of my capacity over time changed my relationship to that trauma as well, to where it wasn't so overwhelming then to talk about it later on.
So, Mahshid, talk a little bit about, if you will, how that experience kind of addressed the trauma or what you were going through in your life compared to your previous experiences with, therapy and talk therapy. What was the difference that was going on for you?
I mean, in the somatic experiencing trainings, we often talk about, top-down approaches versus bottom-up approaches. The top-down approaches that I've been exposed to up until that point were, okay, so you're in this situation. What are some, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, like, can you stop this thought? And what are your triggers and how can you avoid those triggers? And if they come up, can you take some time and can you count to 10? And all of those coping strategies that I had learned were top-down approaches that never really addressed that my nervous system was holding the trauma, that there was some incomplete, maybe self-protective responses that my body was still holding the energy of, And so I understood kind of linearly, about what I was going through, how it related to my behavior today, what things I could manually do to avoid those situations. But it wasn't that I had developed the capacity to show up differently in my life. I'll give you a really concrete example, which is I was afraid of mountains, terrified, right? And so I avoided them. Mm-hmm. As long as I wasn't near a mountain, I didn't have to face that fear. I would only run into that situation if I exposed myself to it. So when I met my current husband, one of our first trips we took was a ski trip to Mammoth. And I remember driving up to Mammoth like this.
Oh, boy.
And just saying, just when we get there, I'm going to be okay because we'll be inside the cabin and it's going to be fine. But driving through these mountains is hard, Mm-hmm. And I'd been avoiding them for so many years that I didn't have to be exposed. I didn't have to feel into that trigger. And so then I started ST therapy, do that for a number of years, current issues, past issues. And I start, I was an avid walker, then I became an avid runner. And then I was like, I want to start hiking. I'm living in this area that's a little hilly. And I started being interested in hiking and would do higher and higher, peaks and hike on the weekends. And one day I came back from a hike. This is like maybe 5-6 years into my relationship with my husband. And I'm telling him about how glorious this hike was. I went up and I was above the clouds and the sun came up and it was beautiful. It was a spiritual experience. I wish you had been there. And he just looks at me and goes, "You don't even remember being afraid of mountains, do you?" And I was like, oh, it wasn't even a conscious thought.
Wow.
It was just like, once that trauma was integrated, this resource could emerge from it without me even consciously doing anything about it.
Wow. Wow. That's a wow experience.
It really is.
I'm thinking, it's funny because as you said that, I'm thinking, with my own experience, like with bullying and stuff and the trauma I've experienced from that. And I don't know if after the various therapies and therapeutic, therapy experiences I've had, I've ever had that experience where it's felt fully integrated like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where the writing came from. Like I am the last person in my family that remembers that story. My sisters were too young to remember. And after my dad passed away, I had this sense of like, I really should write this down just for the next generation, for my sons, mm-hmm. for my nephews, just so that it's in the book somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't. Like I would sit down at my computer to try to write it and I'd become flooded and I'd get overwhelmed and language would fail me and memory would fail me and then I'd just give up. And it wasn't until years later after I'd done this work that I was able to sit down and actually write about the experience. And then once I did that, it just kind of like came out flowing without much effort,
Do you believe that, and I know this is a difficult question to just ask, and it's a general question in a sense, but is it vital for therapists who are working with trauma of all kinds? Obviously, a lot of people who are listening to this are in school or practicing therapists. Is it vital for them to learn a body-based trauma treatment?
I really think so.
Can you say that? Can one say that? we hear so much, the trauma stored in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's a place for talk therapy, obviously.
Absolutely.
Right. But so as a practitioner,
Yeah.
but what do you say to that? How do you respond to that, Mahshid?
I think I would say to that, just like you said, like there is a place for talk therapy. That's actually a phase of the therapy process, right? Like
Right.
I'm not going to be able to dive right into the body and the nervous system with someone who is severely traumatized, who has been detached from their body for years, maybe decades. That's a process that we need to build up to. And in that build up process, talk therapy is absolutely important. I still rely on my education for that phase of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And then slowly, we want to include the body, because talk therapy alone doesn't address the part of the brain where the trauma is held. It holds the memory, and it holds the, our reasoning abilities and our tracking abilities and all of that. But if we really want to integrate the traumatic experience, I think at some point in the therapy process, we do need to address the back of the brain, the brainstem and the body. I think it's crucial.
When you were looking into, modalities, you were getting into psychotherapy and so forth, how did you find SE? Did you just land on it? Was it something that was just coincidental and fortunate for yourself, or did you have to dig and, oh my gosh, I found this?
I did a little bit of digging. I had to do a little bit of digging. I had not been exposed to any somatic modalities in my graduate school. I graduated in 2000 at San Diego State, and I had not been exposed at all to any body modalities. And at the time I discovered the work of Peter Levine, I was working for a nonprofit agency, working in a school-based program. And our program would get the most severe cases in the county for, emotional, behavioral issues of students. And I started seeing this commonality across the board of all these kids have had really rough childhoods, have had parents who are incarcerated, or parents who've struggled with addiction, or the parents who have had mental disorders that have affected them. All of them have this trauma in common. And so I started researching, trauma modalities, working with kids, and came across the book Trauma Through a Child's Eye by Peter Levine. And it's a big fat book. And I remember just carrying it around at the agency and showing it to everyone. And this is really important. I think our program, we need to all get a book club together and read this. And and then he was in town for a talk. I don't even remember who had put that talk together. And I advocated with our executive director to give our program a paid day off, so all of us in the program could go watch Peter speak. And that was kind of the beginning of it, And then so when I was looking for my own therapist, I thought, it would be really great if I could find somebody who does this modality. And that's how I found Roustabout.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So where people are listening to this and they're going, okay, I know, Guy, you're always talking about this, and not just me, but practically everyone who comes on this program talks about the importance of learning the body's role in trauma. What would you recommend a first step for someone to start learning about this?
There's a number of books out there that are really great. All of Peter's books are really informative. The Body Keeps the Score has been on my shelf for a while, and I keep referring back to it. I would look at interviews people have done online, whether Steve Borges or Peter again, or Bessel van der Kolk. And if you go to the SE website, traumahealing.org, there's a number of, under the resources section, there's a number of community conversations. You can hear a few of our faculty members talking on different subjects. I would start there.
Okay.
And then if you find that this speaks for you, all of that up to now, except for the books, is free, you know, then you can sign up for what the SE Institute does, which is like these 3-hour introductory courses that are fairly affordable, and you can do them online now. And that gives you a little bit more detail about the program. And that's where I would start. And also, like, getting a few sessions with a somatic experiencing practitioner. I think that was essential for me to have had that under my belt before I started the training. It was super helpful. Yeah.
You talked about that one of those first experiences where that therapist asked you to growl. And when you were saying that, when you were talking about that, I felt myself like, when a therapist has asked me to do something like that, I feel like, intimidated or embarrassed. Was that something that you had to get over, or did you get over? Or
absolutely. Yeah. I think we spent most of the session on me getting over myself, me getting out of my own way.
Right.
And there is this, like, she was, and now that I'm practicing this myself, she was so confident about what she was asking me to do that I didn't feel any hesitancy from her at all. I think if she had been tentative, we would have never gotten there. But as I said, she just picked up her tea mug and was like, I'll wait.
I love that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think there's a certain amount of confidence that the therapist needs to bring to the game. And that can help reassure a client. But yeah, for sure. I mean, like, along the way, there were multiple points where I had that sort of cautious, from the inside. Anger was, anger is a big thing. Anger is a big thing for women in our culture. Anger was a huge thing for, women in the culture I grew up in, as something that, you keep bubbling under, you control it, you don't let it out. And so at different points in the therapy process, I had to do some work around healthy aggression and how that was okay, especially in a safe environment of the therapy room. Yeah.
In terms of working in the context you do, working with individuals who have been traumatized, you touched upon it just now, but what do you feel is important for you as a therapist to embody? What are some of the qualities that you feel are important to embody, to cultivate? And what was your experience in so doing that?
I keep coming back to, the longer I'm in this business, the more I'm coming back to how important it is to just show up as another human for the client. I think that is the most important ingredient, that I show up in a way where I am open and I can connect to the person's humanity no matter what they're going through. I think that joining is really, really, really important. And then the other piece for me in practicing SE is cultivating the belief that the client already possesses the tools they need, that their body is designed to help them get to the best outcome. And so I see my role less as a director, a do this, don't do that, and more of a guide to help them find the tools that are accessible to them. And that means that we work with whatever is accessible on day one, and then we change as we progress, right? Like 3 months down the road, now you have more tools that we can access. Like you have a bigger capacity. We can play with higher intensities. We can go a little bit deeper. But that I don't show up to the therapy process with an agenda of, this is what we need to get to. I'm always trying to figure out, what are you able to do? And I want to join in with that.
When you first started, was that where you were at? Or
no.
Right.
Oh, no, 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 no. No. And it's you go through the SE training and they do demos. It's a very experiential training. We do demo sessions, the teacher does a demo session, then we do triad work in the afternoons. And they go a certain way because the people that show up to these things, have a certain amount of capacity already. They're interested. They already know what they're getting into. And so so I would come back from the training, go into my office and try to do it and go, it's not working, So that took some practice. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Let me we're winding down here, but I just want to reintroduce you. I'm speaking with Mahshid Hager. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner. I want to kind of wrap up with this question, and it's this. You've been doing this for a while. You've had a lot of experiences. Can you share like an early clinical error or mistake or misstep, whatever you want to call it, and what you learned from that?
Yeah, I think my early mistakes all have a theme, which is I was going too fast. Like I would show up and think I've got this great tool and I need to get you into your body. And if you let me do that, we'll all be better off.
Right.
And then I would keep bumping into resistance. I would keep bumping into overwhelm. I would keep bumping into people not knowing what I'm talking about. So a lot of my early sessions were, oh, I went too fast. Oh, I need to back out. Oh, I went too fast. I need to back out. And it took some practice and some time and some patience with myself and some patience with the clients to say, okay, we're just going to get together and see what we can get done, and see what you want to do and see what you have capacity for today. And if you come to me and say, I've had a really stressful week, I feel so overwhelmed, I just want to lay down and take a nap, I know I'm, whatever I have in my mind about where we are in the therapy process, I need to abandon that. I need to put that, put that aside, and maybe we just chit chat. Maybe we just, sit here and take it really slowly and see how that feels. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. Well, it's been a delight talking to you. I'd love to have you back. It's awesome speaking with you. You emanate this like gentleness and humanity that I aspire to have this podcast be about.
Oh, thank you so much. This was great fun. I would love to come back.
Appreciate that. So share with our listeners, Mahshid, the best way for them to get in touch with you.
The best way to get in touch with me is probably through email. It's mhager, MFT @gmail.com.
Okay.
But I'm also on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and they can just look me up. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll have those links at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Awesome. All right, Mahshid. Well, again, incredibly inspiring talking to you. And thanks so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, folks, the SE Trauma Institute hopes you enjoys today's episode. And a reminder, if you're looking to learn more about the transformational practice of somatic experiencing, you can get complimentary access to the SE Basics webinar by going to traumahealing.org/traumatherapist. Once again, traumahealing.org/traumatherapist before November 30th, 2020.